While the future is teal, what are the worst case scenarios for the San Jose Sharks heading into the season?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making the Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be examining three worst case scenarios for the San Jose Sharks as they enter into this season. We're going to be looking at goaltending disaster. If the offense can't take the next step, and if the blue line, especially the new faces, just aren't up to task, and why these would all be part of a worst case scenario for the San Jose Sharks. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers, if you download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com, and you'll win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, worst case scenarios, and like the worst case is like season ending, like injuries to your star. Like, I'm not gonna, like, if Celebrini blows out his knee, knock on wood, whatever you want to do, like it's something like that, right? Absolutely worst case scenario is something like that, like a career, like those are the worst case. That's what we're not going to focus on, because if any of those things happens, yes, that's your word, like an injury like that, where it like knocks a player out for the season, or it's one of those like where it drastically alters a player's career. That's what we're focusing on. We're focusing more on, on ice product, and if things that we expect to happen don't happen. And I think there's no better place to start than Yaroslav Askarov, right? The Sharks have been kind of working towards this moment over the past year to put Askarov in place to be their next goalie of the now, as well as goalie of the future, right? And they gave up a lot to get him, right? First round pick, a first round prospect in David Edstrom that you received, both those pieces you received in the Tomas Hertl trade from the Vegas Golden Knights. And you turn around and you flip them for Askarov, who has been, if you look at basically every goaltending list right now, he is the guy when it comes to guys who are like the best goalie who's not in the NHL is Yaroslav Askarov, right? And the Sharks are, I don't want to say they're putting a lot of eggs in the Askarov basket, but like they are banking on and hoping and, kind of expecting Askarov to be the guy, right? And this is not to say I don't think Askarov is going to be the guy. Again, we were looking at worst case scenarios for this season. But what if Askarov isn't the guy, right? And we saw last year he played very well with the San Jose Barracuda, but he struggled with injuries, right? The hope is he can stay healthy this year. Again, not try not to focus on injuries, but a guy who did struggle to stay healthy last year, even from the moment he got here, right? Dealt with a little bit of an injury in training camp. Played very well the first half of the season. Got a little nicked up after getting called up to the NHL. Missed about 6 weeks when he got sent back down to the AHL, and made it back in time to have a very good playoff run, right? But there was definitely some ups and downs and during that, especially that middle part of the season when he was dealing with injuries. And yes, the Sharks went out and they traded for Alex Nedeljkovic, but there's not like a third dude that you feel super comfortable with, right? They signed Jacob Skarek, who played with in the Islanders organization and has a whopping 2 games, right? 2 NHL games under his belt. So it's not like the Sharks have a backup plan for if Askarov can't stay healthy. But assuming he stays healthy, what if Askarov just isn't the guy, right? Or what if it's And again, he's going to be a rookie playing through his first full season in the NHL. He's going to have ups and downs, right? And you saw that last year, right? Even in his 13 games in the NHL last year, where you saw plenty of ups, like plenty of great plays, plenty of reasons to believe why you think he's going to be the guy. You also saw some young player mistakes, especially when it comes to kind of, handling the puck, et cetera, et cetera. And he said it himself, right? Sometimes good, sometimes poop. He didn't say poop. I can't say it, but you know what he said. He's going to have these moments, right? That's, again, every young player. But if Askarov struggles this season, especially behind a defense who we'll talk about later, which feels a little patchworky, right? Yes, they went out and acquired some veteran people, but we're going to be you're banking on a lot of those guys to kind of either return to form or hang on, right? And you look at the Barracuda defense, which was much better, was excellent last year, right? They went out and they got Jimmy Schultz, who was one of the best defensive defensemen in the AHL. You got Lucas Carlson, who's great at generating offense. You had Muka Madulin, a player, right, who was kind of expected to be in the NHL, but because of his injury, kind of pushed that back for half a season. You had Luca Cagnoni, who had one of the best seasons by a defenseman last year in the AHL as a 19/20-year-old. All right, I think he was second in scoring as a defenseman. If I recall, he was like second or third, but just an insane scoring and production from him. The Barracuda defense was extremely good last year, extremely good defense. And yes, Askarov was amazing for the Barracuda, but this is going to be a different level, right? I mean, jumping up to the NHL, the Sharks defense is nowhere near as good as the Barracudas was relative to the league that they're playing in. So you're going to have more question marks about what Askarov is going to do. And again, I think Askarov is going to have a great season, but we're looking at worst case scenarios. And what if Askarov isn't an improvement on Georgiev or isn't an improvement on, Vitek Vanacek and comes nowhere close to touching what Mackenzie Blackwood did last year. And, yes, I know he signed for only 2 years at $2 million. So you can kind of go into next off season and right, you still have him signed for another year and you can kind of see what happens. But then you are going to be in the market for, a starter, like a guy who can play 50 games a season for a team that we're expecting to, especially in the 26-27 season, start to take a big jump with all this young talent. And you just have a big question mark at goal. And we see teams all the time, right? You have all the talent in the world, and if the goaltending is holding you back, right, you're as good as your goaltending sometimes. So I think that's the biggest, out of everything that we're going to talk about, this is, I think, the worst case scenario is if the goaltending doesn't improve in any way, shape, or form, and most of it being because of Askarov, right? Because how much you've invested in Askarov, and a first round pick and a first round prospect from a couple drafts ago, you invested a lot in a player who is supposed to be basically NHL ready, and the Sharks were very, I don't know, careful is the right word, but they wanted to let him marinate a little bit more. And yes, he got a taste of NHL games last year. And he played really well for the most part in those games, but it would just be one of those things where your investment would feel like it's just going south, basically a year into it, or into year 2 of it. So I think that's the worst case scenario. No matter what else happens, if the offense can't take a step, if the blue line struggles, but if Askarov and Nedeljkovic to a smaller degree, if they can't be an improvement on what we saw last year, I think that's your absolute worst case scenario, because you're just in the same spot. And I think Askarov and Celebrini are big reasons why the Sharks aren't going to be the leaders in the clubhouse when it comes to the McKenna race. So we're going to talk about the offense and Celebrini and Will Smith and all these guys, and if they maybe can't take that next step, why again another worst case scenario for the San Jose Sharks. So we'll talk about that here in just 1 second. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because you can fit however you like to play. If you want to do kind of like player props, which are always super fun, right? It's fun to watch players do cool things. If you want to build a same game parlay, if you're feeling confident, I'm feeling very confident about my Dolphins over the Colts this weekend. Hint, hint. It's quick, it's easy. It's the best way to add a little bit of energy to Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, before we continue, of course want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. If you haven't yet, perfect time to subscribe. We are back to 5 shows a week starting next week, even though you're probably getting 5 shows a week this week. Plus, we have rookie face-off. We have preseason games, plenty of great stuff here at Locked On Sharks. So make sure you're following along wherever you get podcasts. And, of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right, second worst case scenario. Again, kind of how I expect these, which ones I think. And I think the second one is if the offense continues to be among the absolute worst in the NHL, right? Worst team last year when it came to scoring goals. Second to last the year before, I think the Chicago Blackhawks saving them. If the offense can't take a step, and again, I'm not expecting this offense to be like a top 10 offense or anything like that, but like pulling yourself off the mat, especially with how much the Sharks have invested in the forward department, right? Macklin Celebrini, first overall pick. Will Smith, 4th overall pick. William Eklund, 7th overall pick. Michael Misa, 2nd overall pick. Like those are homegrown talents, and yes, 3 of those guys I just mentioned are 20 and under. But we saw, especially the second half of the season last year, right? Especially when Will Smith started to figure things out, where you could see the offense start to generate more games, right? And you point to that game against the Wild, where the Will Smith hat trick, or Macklin Celebrini hat trick game, and Will Smith, like the 5 and 4 point games from both those guys. Like you saw opportunities and you saw moments where you saw pieces of the future of why we expect this team to be a juggernaut offensively because of Celebrini and Smith and Eklund and now Misa, and then you went out and you got some veterans like Jeff Skinner, Kurashev, who has been a 50-point guy before, Gaudette, who scored 20 goals last year. Like you have more. You're hoping to see more, 1, internal growth from the offense, and 2, some more depth, especially in the middle 6, right? I know, Mikael Granlund was a huge part of it, and Fabian Zetterlund, who you traded away, and right, you can easily argue that you could have just kept those guys, right? But still, like you are hoping that it is Misa and Celebrini and Smith and Eklund start leading the way for these guys. We've seen a lot of reasons to believe that they should take a jump, right? And if you go from the worst scoring team in the NHL to like the 20th, so I'm trying to pull this up here on the fly, but like that would be a huge jump for a team that, right? You're trying to take some pressure off your goaltending. You're trying to take some pressure off your defense, which was under duress, especially the past 2 seasons. Like having a team that can like score some more and not just struggle to score goals on a nightly basis. So the Sharks scored 208 goals, right? Even if you had like 30 goals over 82 game season, 30 goals. That puts you up at 22, 20 compared to like the Detroit Red Wings last year had 235 goals. The Utah Hockey Club, now Mammoths, hit 240. They were at 21, 22. So if you add 30 goals to your 208, and yes, 30 goals, that's a lot. But again, right? Celebrini, fully healthy. Like, is there's a very easy world where we can be talking about Celebrini pushing for 40 goals, right? Will Smith pushing for 30 goals. Eklund over the 20 goal mark. Jeff Skinner returns to form and can be at 25 goals to score. Tyler Toffoli is a walking 30 goals, right? Like, all these guys, just couple here, couple there from each of these guys here, and again, like if Celebrini makes a big jump, that's like almost half those 30 goals, right? From 25 to 30, 25 to pushing to 40, that's 15 goals. That's a big jump, massive jump. But if these guys stay stagnant, right, and they're kind of putting up the same amount of offense that they did last year, and yes, hopefully their goaltending is improving, but and yes, defense wins championships, but you can't win every game 2-1, right? And you cannot ask Askarov to be, hey, you can't give up more than one because our offense just cannot generate more than 2 goals a game, right? And that is, I think, the second worst case scenario is just the offense doesn't take a jump, and 2.5 goals last year. That's what they scored, 2.54. If you can get closer to that 3, yes, 3 goals puts you at like midway. So the Florida Panthers scored exactly 3 goals a game last year, and they were 15th in the league. If you get just, even again, if you're in the high 2.8s, high 2.9s, or low 2.9s, that's a massive improvement. And hopefully you're not giving up as many goals. But I think, though, like trying to rely on this offense to just going out there and saying the goaltending is going to get better, but the offense stays stagnant, I think is your second worst case scenario. Because, again, with how much you have put into forward resources, right? Again, Celebrini, Smith, Eklund, and expecting Misa to make this team, or like it's all but sign the contract at this point, basically. Having the offense be stagnant and finish around dead last or near the bottom of the league again, and not showing some improvement, I think would be the second worst case scenario for this team. Because it just feels like, well, why did you put so much stuff in, so many resources in here? And yes, I know these are young guys, and there's a very easy chance that Will Smith struggles at center. Celebrini, right? As much as we expect a big jump from him, but we know development's not linear, right? And there's ups and downs with it. And if Celebrini, we saw Connor Bedard, but generational talent, struggled in year 2, right? You didn't see as much production this past season with him. Eklund, who going into year 3 now, right? And maybe Eklund we want to see him be a 70-point type of player, but right, if he's making plays and his line mates struggle, or he's not put in a position to succeed, or he himself can't score, can't get over that 20 goal mark, Tyler Toffoli takes a step back because of age. Jeff Skinner just isn't that guy anymore. All the other additions that you added just don't kind of live up to expectations. There's a very easy world to see where this team just still continues to struggle to score goals. I'm not expecting this team to be a top half of the NHL when it comes to offense, but you got to start making some strides. So we're going to talk about the blue line. And while this one's actually the easiest to see happening when it comes to worst case scenarios, this one's I'm actually not as worried about being a worst case scenario. So we'll explain here in just one second. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives, and if you've been putting off organizing your finances, Monarch is there for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are for nerds. So maximize investments using Monarch. And the great thing too is if you and your partner, you have your own independent accounts, but you're also working towards shared goals, whether it's your next vacation, buying a house, buying a car, whatever it is, you guys can work together while also keeping your own accounts separate. So don't let financial opportunities slip through your cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, before we finish up, of course want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There's no off season, bringing the daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, finally, the third worst case scenario. This one's actually the easiest to see coming, potentially see coming. I think it's the defense just not gelling or not kind of living up to task. And while this one's, again, the most predictable of the three, this one I'm actually not as worried about when it comes to worst case scenarios. And the main reason is because all these guys aren't going to be here next year. And it's the easiest to kind of fix long term. So let's get into it. So we know, right, the Sharks, they signed Dmitry Orlov to a 2-year deal. You signed Jeff Klingberg to a 1-year, or John Klingberg, to a 1-year deal. You claimed Nick Leddy off of waivers. You also have Sam Dickinson trying to make the team. We still don't know more on what his situation is with the AHL potential rulings. I know there was a governor meeting today, or, all the important big wigs and stuff. I know the GMs were there. No clarity on that. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those things that we probably don't find out until right before the season starts. And I know the CHL is worried about it, but CHL, you're going to be losing your top players anyway. So, sorry, guys. So you're right. You have all those guys. You have Shakir Mukhamadullin, who's expected to be a full-time guy. You have Mario Ferraro and Timothy Liljegren, both coming back, both entering the last year of their deals. You have guys like Jack Thompson who's going to be pushing. You have Luca Cagnoni who's going to be pushing for a job. But, there's a lot of moving pieces. Oh, and Benny Desharnais. Sorry, Mr. Desharnais, forgot about you as well. But a lot of people and names moving around here, right? And the hope is, especially if you look at the new faces with Klingberg, with Orlov, with Leddy, you hope realistically, you hope 2 out of 3 work out, right? You hope John Klingberg, who has struggled with injuries over the last couple seasons, has been nowhere near the same guy since he left Dallas. Dallas looks very smart for cutting bait when they did, and the guy who's bounced around on multiple teams and had multiple injuries over that time in Klingberg. You're hoping he can regain anywhere near his previous form. That's a lot to ask. A lot to ask for a guy who, again, hasn't really had the production in 4 years now for Klingberg, right? You're hoping he can get somewhere close to that. If Dmitry Orlov, who, we talked with our friend Zach from Locked On Hurricanes recently, where start to see some, not the fastest guy. You start to see some kind of cracks in the armor there, kind of losing a step there. Like Orlov's going to be the guy for the Sharks this year because of just whoever else, and that's a big ask for a guy who's always had John Carlson in front of him, Slavin in front of, like, he's always had a top flight defenseman in front of him like his entire career. This is gonna be the first time where he is said defenseman, right? Nick Leddy, who dealt with injuries all last year, again, kind of looked like he was losing a bit of a step. Didn't seem super happy about how this whole thing progressed and turned out, and how he ended up with the Sharks for a guy who had no trade clause, or he had trade protections, and the Blues were like, well, we'll just waive you and let the Sharks claim you, just like we saw with Goodrow the year before. Like, there's a very realistic world where he's just like, I don't want to be here, guys. Like, whatever, man. My contract's done at the end. I don't mind signing a Vetman contract the next year and go playing on a better team type of thing. That's, again, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it could. It could very easily. Mukma Doolan, he played very well last year at times. He also made a lot of mistakes as well. If he's unable to take a big jump, right? Ferraro, Liljegren, you kind of know what those guys are going to be. If Sam Dickinson, is not NHL ready and has to go back to the OHL next year, or like, you can see a very logical path for this defense to be horrific again. But again, like, it would be a terrible scenario if the defense is really bad again, especially with the resources you kind of applied, right? With the signings that you made to try to improve it. But this one, though, like I said, I'm not as worried about it because it's not like you locked up guys long term. Like, Orlov's the only guy who's expected to be back next year, or who's signed for next year. Like, Sam Dickinson is going to be on the NHL in the 26-27 season, right? Whether he's in the AHL or this year or goes to the OHL, like, I think Sam Dickinson will be in the NHL the 26-27 season. You, like, Mukma Doolan, probably going to be on the team again next year, but if it's that horrific and he's not that guy, like, it's pretty easy to kind of just move on, right? Liljegren and Ferraro, both guys were probably going to be trade fodder at some point. If not one, both potentially could go at some point this season. Same thing with Klingberg, and the same thing with Leddy, where, I think Klingberg took this job because he realizes there's an opportunity to kind of rehabilitate my image and then try to go out somewhere else. And the same thing with Leddy, right? Where, okay, like, again, I'm happy to go waive my no trade clause to go play somewhere else because I don't want to lose a bunch of games here in San Jose. So while most realistic of the worst case scenarios here is the blue line just isn't up to task, and especially the new faces, this is what I'm actually least worried about. Most mentally prepared to happen among the other two, because I think so highly of Askarov and what I believe the impact he's going to have on the Sharks. And I think him, as well as Celebrini, are going to be the big reasons why the Sharks aren't in the driver's seat for the McKenna sweepstakes. So yes, those are, I think, the three worst case scenarios for the San Jose Sharks, outside of like brutal injury type, which would of course be the worst case scenario for San Jose. So we'll be back tomorrow. We're going to look at the best case scenarios for the Sharks, right? Got to have balance. First of all, though, shout out Joe Pavelski, getting in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. I like Pavelski. I really like Pavelski. I know my former co-host Kyle, not the biggest Pavelski fan. Joe Pavelski's awesome. I don't care. Like, how can you not root for Joe Pavelski? Anyway, shout out to Pavelski. So, but we'll be back tomorrow. So make sure you follow along wherever you get podcasts, and of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok. All at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.